The northern wind carried the stench of blood. Kaelen dragged his sword through the mud. He wiped a grimy hand across his brow. His armor was caked in gore and filth. A great and terrible silence fell. Finally, the battlefield was a graveyard of fallen giants. Only the crows dared to break the quiet. They were the true victors of this war. His men moved slowly among the countless dead. They collected dog tags with solemn reverence. Each one represented a life given for victory. This hard-won peace felt incredibly fragile. Kaelen allowed himself a single tired smile. They were finally going home now. The capital's gleaming spires awaited their return. He could almost hear the cheering crowds. He could almost taste the sweet wine. His emperor would surely welcome him warmly. His years of service had culminated here. This victory would secure the empire's borders. He had fulfilled his duty perfectly. He would see his little sister soon. Her face kept him fighting through hell. That thought alone sustained his broken spirit. The journey home felt strangely endless. The triumphant march was a blur. Soldiers laughed and sang songs of victory. Kaelen remained quiet within his thoughts. A faint unease gnawed at his gut. The northern gates swung open before them. The city was breathtakingly beautiful and white, but the streets were eerily quiet. There were no cheering masses waiting. There were no flowers on the cobblestones. Only cold stares watched them pass. The noble districts were completely silent. Their curtains remained drawn and shut. Something was profoundly wrong here. His lieutenant rode up beside him. The man offered a weak, nervous smile. His eyes darted around the plaza. "The Emperor awaits you at the palace." His voice was a tense whisper. Kaelen nodded once and said nothing. The imperial palace loomed above them. Its shadow felt cold and oppressive. The honor guard did not salute. Their faces were carved from stone. Kaelen climbed the marble steps alone. His spurs echoed in the vast hall. The emperor sat upon his diamond throne. His expression was utterly unreadable and cold. The court nobles formed a silent circle. Their eyes were full of venom. Kaelen knelt before his sovereign ruler. He placed his sword on the floor. "I have returned from the north. The barbarian threat is ended forever." His voice echoed in the stillness. The emperor did not speak immediately. He stared down with icy disdain. "Rise. General let us see you." The command was soft, yet dangerous. Kaelen stood to his full height. He met his emperor's gaze directly. "We have received some troubling reports. They come from the northern front." The emperor's voice was like silk. It wrapped around Kaelen's throat slowly. "Reports of treason, most foul indeed." A murmur ran through the court. Kaelen's blood ran suddenly very cold. "I do not understand, my emperor. My loyalty has never been questioned." The emperor gestured with a pale hand. His lieutenant stepped forward from the crowd. The man would not meet his eyes. "Tell the court what you told me." The lieutenant swallowed hard and spoke. "General Kaelen treated with the enemy. He planned this war from the start. He sought to bleed the empire dry. He promised the chieftain a shared kingdom." Each word was a sharp dagger. Kaelen could only stare in disbelief. This was some terrible twisted joke. He is lying. Every word is false. I have known this man for years. His protest sounded weak and desperate. The emperor produced a stack of letters. "Your signature is on these documents. Your seal is upon every single page. They detail your plans quite thoroughly." Kaelen recognized the perfect, flawless forgery. He saw his own hand mirrored there. The magic involved was profoundly powerful. This was a plot of great depth. He looked at the faces around him. He saw only hatred and satisfaction. They had always despised a commoner. They hated his influence and his rank. This was their chance to remove him. "I have only ever served you. I won this war for you." His voice was raw with emotion. The emperor's face remained a cold mask. "You won a war you created. You sacrificed thousands of imperial soldiers, all for your own monstrous greed and ambition. You are a traitor to the crown." The finality in his tone was absolute. The guards moved in swiftly around him. They ripped the medals from his chest. They tore the epaulets from his shoulders. Each violation was a public humiliation. The court nobles watched with hungry eyes. They enjoyed his fall from grace immensely. His own men were held back outside. They could not help him now. He was utterly alone in this den. You will confess to your crimes. You will name your co-conspirators eventually. The Emperor's voice was devoid of mercy. Kaelen spat on the polished marbled floor. I have no co-conspirators. This is a lie. This is a betrayal of your own loyal servant. The backhand struck his face hard. A ring cut his cheek deeply. Blood trickled down his jawline slowly. Take him to the abyssal mines. Let the darkness there loosen his tongue. The command was a death sentence. No one ever returned from those mines. The guards roughly chained his hands. They dragged him backward from the throne room. He caught his lieutenant's eye for a second. The man quickly looked away in shame. Gold had clearly bought his betrayal. The grand doors closed behind him. The sunlight of the plaza blinded him. A crowd had finally gathered there. They threw rotten fruit and stones. They screamed curses upon his name. They called him a monster and a traitor. He had given everything for these people. He had bled and suffered for them. They now reveled in his destruction. His heart turned to solid black ice. The chains bit into his wrists. They threw him into a black wagon. The door slammed shut with finality. Darkness swallowed him whole, completely. The wagon began to move slowly. It carried him toward a living hell. He made a promise to himself. Then he would survive this injustice somehow. He would remember every single face. He would remember every single word. He would have his vengeance upon them all. They would regret creating this enemy. The Empire would learn true fear. The wagon's descent felt like an eternity. It rattled down a steep, spiraling path. The air grew colder and heavier with each turn. The stench of damp rock and despair filled his lungs. Kaelen's mind replayed the betrayal on a loop. His lieutenant's cowardly eyes haunted him the most. The chains around his wrists were ice cold. They finally reached the bottom of the abyss. The door screeched open to reveal a nightmare. Haggard men moved like ghosts in the gloom. Their eyes were empty, hollowed-out pits. Towering obsidian walls seemed to swallow the light. A brutish guard yanked him out roughly. He stumbled onto the uneven, rocky ground. Welcome to your new home, traitor. The guard's laugh was a harsh, grating sound. He received a shove between his shoulder blades. He was thrown into a line of prisoners. They shuffled forward toward a massive cavern. The constant clang of pickaxes was deafening. A guard shoved a heavy tool into his hands. The rusted iron pickaxe felt impossibly heavy. You work until your body gives out. You eat what we give you without complaint. You sleep when we allow it. Any disobedience is punished with extreme prejudice. The guard pointed toward a writhing body nearby. A man was being whipped mercilessly for slowing. His cries were mere whimpers against the noise. Kaelen's first shift was a blur of agony. His muscles screamed in protest with every movement. The strange black ore resisted every strike. It seemed to absorb the light and sound. A profound exhaustion seeped into his bones. It felt deeper than mere physical fatigue. It was a leeching of his very spirit. The guards patrolled with cruel, casual indifference. Their whips cracked against tired backs constantly. The prisoners were nothing but expendable resources. They were fuel for the Empire's endless hunger. He learned the routine through sheer repetition. Work, eat, sleep, and then work again. Days bled together in the monotonous help. The meager food was barely enough to survive. It was a thin gruel, full of lumps. Water came from a dank, questionable seepage. Hope was the first thing to die here. Men simply faded away into nothingness. Their bodies were dragged away without ceremony. Kaelen clung to one thing only. The burning ember of his hatred remained. He fed it with every remembered slight. He nurtured it with every crack of the whip. It was the only warmth he possessed. He observed the mine's operations with a soldier's eye. The best workers were sent deeper inside. They never returned from those dark tunnels. The guards seemed nervous near certain areas. They avoided a particular fissure with obvious fear. They crossed themselves when walking past it. Whispers passed among the most broken prisoners. They spoke of a curse deep within. They talked of a hunger in the rock. Kaelen stored this information away carefully. An opportunity presented itself during a kaveen. A sudden rumble shook the entire chamber. Dust and debris rained down from above. Panic erupted among the guards and prisoners. Everyone scrambled for the main tunnel's safety. In the chaos, Kaelen made his choice. He turned and ran toward the forbidden fissure. He slipped into the narrow, dark crack unnoticed. The sounds of panic faded behind him quickly. Deeper and deeper, he ventured into the earth. The air grew thick and difficult to breathe. A strange purple light pulsed ahead of him. It emanated from a cluster of crystals. They were unlike the ore outside completely. They throbbed with a malevolent inner life. He reached a hand out toward them. The crystal reacted to his touch violently. A searing pain shot up his arm. Images flooded his mind in a terrifying torrent. The Emperor's smiling face, signing the execution order. His lieutenant, counting a huge pile of gold. His sister, crying alone in a dark room. The pain intensified beyond any conceivable measure. He collapsed onto the cold, hard ground. His body convulsed against the rough stone. He felt a presence inside his mind. It was ancient and vast and infinitely hungry. It fed upon his pain and his rage. It found his emotions to be delicious. A voice echoed within his very soul. It was the sound of grinding stones. You reek of betrayal, little mortal thing. You are full of such delicious anger. I can grant you the power you crave. I can make you an instrument of vengeance. You need only to accept my gift. Kaelen fought against the invading presence. He tried to push the voice away. The images of his suffering returned stronger. He saw his men dying for nothing. He saw the courtiers laughing at him. The voice whispered promises of sweet retribution. Together we will break this empire utterly. We will feast upon their fear and screams. Your vengeance will be absolute and terrible. Say yes, and let the pain end. Kaelen's resistance crumbled under the weight. His desire for revenge outweighed his fear. He embraced the pain and the darkness. He gave himself to the ancient entity. Yes. The words left his lips. As a gasp, the crystals flared with blinding purple light. The energy surged into his broken body. It felt like being burned alive from within. His scars glowed with the same eerie light. New markings etched themselves across his skin. They swirled like living shadows on his flesh. The pain vanished, replaced by terrifying power. He felt stronger than he ever had before. The shadows in the cavern seemed to stir. They reached for him like eager pets. He could feel the life of the guards. He could feel their fear and their cruelty. He could taste their potential energy waiting. He was no longer just a prisoner. He was something new and dangerous and dark. He stood up in the pulsating gloom. His eyes opened, glowing with violet fire. Was Unger. He was vengeance. Was free. The power was a raging river inside him. It threatened to tear his very soul apart. Kaelen gasped for air he did not need. His body was no longer entirely his own. The shadowy tattoos pulsed with a cold rhythm. They were a living map of his damnation. The voice in his mind was a constant presence. It was the primordial shade, and it was hungry. This vessel is weak and broken from neglect. We must feed it to become strong. Your hatred is a fine starting fuel. But it is not enough for the journey. Kaelen looked at his own hands. In wonder, they were his hands, but also not. The shadows in the cavern clung to them. They whispered secrets only he could now hear. He could feel the life of everything. He sensed the guards' heartbeats like distant drums. Their fear was a sweet scent on the air. The shade urged him to take that fear. They are nothing but cattle waiting for slaughter. Their life force will make us whole again. Reach out and take what is owed you. Kaelen resisted the instinctual pull of the darkness. He still remembered the man he once was. That man would not kill without purpose. The shade laughed at his feeble moral struggle. Your precious honor died on that throne room floor. It died with every stone the crowd threw. You embraced me to survive and to conquer. Now you must learn to truly embrace the power A sound echoed from the tunnel behind him. The cautious footsteps of a guard approached slowly. A beam of light cut through the purple gloom. "Hello! Is someone in this restricted area? Answer me or face the consequences immediately." The guard's voice trembled with undisguised fear. This area was clearly forbidden for a reason. Kaelen willed the shadows around him to deepen. They obeyed his thought without any hesitation. They coiled around him like a protective cloak. The guard stepped into the crystal chamber nervously. He was a young man with wide eyes. He held his spear with a white-knuckled grip. He did not see Kaelen standing perfectly still. The Kaelen must have opened this place. The foreman will want to seal it quickly. The guard turned to leave and report his find. Kaelen knew he could not allow that. His existence was a secret that must remain. The shade whispered its agreement within his mind. The power was a raging river inside him. It threatened to tear his very soul apart. Kaelen gasped for air he did not need. His body was no longer entirely his own. The shadowy tattoos pulsed with a cold rhythm. They were a living map of his damnation. The voice in his mind was a constant presence. It was the primordial shade, and it was hungry. "This vessel is weak and broken from neglect. We must feed it to become strong. Your hatred is a fine starting fuel. But it is not enough for the journey." Kaelen looked at his own hands. In wonder, they were his hands, but also not. The shadows in the cavern clung to them. They whispered secrets only he could now hear. He could feel the life of everything. He sensed the guards' heartbeats like distant drums. Their fear was a sweet scent on the air. The shade urged him to take that fear. They are nothing but cattle waiting for slaughter. Their life force will make us whole again. Reach out and take what is owed you. Kaelen resisted the instinctual pull of the darkness. He still remembered the man he once was. That man would not kill without purpose. The shade laughed at his feeble moral struggle. Your precious honor died on that throne room floor. It died with every stone the crowd threw. You embraced me to survive and to conquer. Now you must learn to truly embrace the power. A sound echoed from the tunnel behind him. The cautious footsteps of a guard approached slowly. A beam of light cut through the purple gloom. "Hello! Is someone in this restricted area? Answer me or face the consequences immediately." The guard's voice trembled with undisguised fear. This area was clearly forbidden for a reason. Kaelen willed the shadows around him to deepen. They obeyed his thought without any hesitation. They coiled around him like a protective cloak. The guard stepped into the crystal chamber nervously. He was a young man with wide eyes. He held his spear with a white-knuckled grip. He did not see Kaelen standing perfectly still. The Kaelen must have opened this place. The foreman will want to seal it quickly. The guard turned to leave and report his find. Kaelen knew he could not allow that. His existence was a secret that must remain. The shade whispered its agreement within his mind. He dragged the body into a deep crevice. The crystals seemed to absorb it greedily. There was no evidence left of the deed. He was a ghost, now within the mine. He moved back toward the main tunnel silently. The shadows bent to obscure his passage completely. He saw two more guards rounding a corner. They were laughing about a prisoner's misfortune. They did not see death standing beside them. Kaelen reached out with his newfound power. He did not need to touch them physically. The shadows did his bidding without any question. They coiled around the guards' throats like vipers. Their laughter was cut off into choked gurgles. Their life force flowed into him from a distance. It was even easier than the first time. Their bodies fell and were consumed by darkness. The shade fed upon their final moments of terror. Their fear is a spice upon the meal. You will learn to savor it in time. Kaelen continued his walk through the mines. He was no longer a prisoner here. He was the master of this dark domain. The prisoners shrank back from his passing instinctively. They sensed the predator walking among them. The guards fell without ever seeing their attacker. He was a rumor, a whisper, a nightmare. He was becoming the enemy the Empire created. He would ensure their creation was their doom. He found the warden's office near the elevator. The man was fat and greedy and cruel. He was counting coins from a recent bribe. He did not look up from his desk. "What is it? Can you not see? I am busy." Kaelen closed the door behind him, softly. He removed the helmet and let it drop. The warden looked up with irritation at first. Then his face paled to a sickly white. He recognized the former general immediately, of course. You are supposed to be dead. Guards. Someone come here this instant. No one came to answer his desperate call. Kaelen smiled a cold and empty smile. The shadows in the room began to move. They cannot hear you over the noise. The mines are so very loud today. The warden scrambled for a weapon on the wall. His fingers never reached the ceremonial sword. Darkness pinned him to his expensive leather chair. Kaelen approached him with slow, deliberate steps. You enjoy feeding people to the darkness. Now you will join them forever. The warden's scream was swallowed by the shadows. His life was a rich and decadent feast. Kaelen absorbed every last bit of his corruption. He now knew the elevator's schedule and codes. He knew the guard rotations for the top. He knew everything he needed for his escape. He looked toward the surface far above him. His vengeance would begin sooner than they expected. The Empire would soon learn true fear. The warden's keys felt cold in his hand. Kaelen dragged the empty uniform into a corner. The shadows eagerly consumed the leftover evidence. He now wore the warden's own finer clothes. They fit him poorly, but conveyed authority. The primordial shade stirred with impatient anticipation within him. The path upward is now clear for us. These insects have delayed our purpose long enough. Kaelen stepped out of the plush office. The main cavern was a scene of chaos. Guards shouted orders that no one followed. Prisoners huddled together in confused, frightened groups. The disappearance of their overseers was causing panic. Kaelen walked through the turmoil completely untouched. The shadows cloaked him in a shifting veil. Men's eyes simply slid away from his form. He was a ghost in plain sight. He reached the massive iron elevator gates. A nervous guard stood watch, there alone. He was young and barely looked 80. "Halt! No one is authorized for ascent today." The guard's voice cracked with adolescent fear. Kaelen did not bother to speak a word. He simply met the young man's eyes. His own eyes glowed with faint violet light. The guard's face went slack with instant terror. He fumbled for the horn at his belt. A tendril of shadow snatched it away. Another shadow wrapped around his mouth tightly. His life force was a brief, small snack. Kaelen left the desiccated form against the wall. He inserted the warden's key into the mechanism. The elevator gates shuddered and began to open. The sound was a monstrous grinding of gears. Every prisoner and guard turned to look. Hope and fear warred on the prisoners' faces. The remaining guards drew their weapons in alarm. The elevator, someone is trying to escape. Their cries were lost in the sudden roar. Kaelen stepped onto the large wooden platform. He turned to face the entire mine. He allowed the shadows to drop from him. His true identity was revealed to all. Gasps and shouts echoed throughout the cavern. The traitor general. He has killed the warden. The guards surged toward him with raised swords. Kaelen simply raised his own hand calmly. The shadows behind him erupted into violent life. They became a wall of grasping claws. They swallowed the advancing guards in an instant. Their screams were cut off with brutal finality. The prisoners fell to their knees in awe. They saw a vengeful god before them. Kaelen's voice boomed across the vast space. It was amplified by the shade's power. The Empire has fed on your suffering long enough. Their greed created the monster I have become. I am leaving this place behind now. I suggest you all do the same. He pulled the lever to start the ascent. The elevator began its long, slow climb upward. The prisoners below stared in stunned silence. Then a single cry of rebellion rang out. It was followed by another and another. The riot began in earnest below him. Kaelen watched the chaos diminish with distance. He felt no pride in their rebellion. They were merely a distraction for his escape. The elevator climbed through layers of solid rock. The air grew gradually colder and less stale. The primordial shade savored the recent offerings greedily. Their fear was a potent and delicious energy. You will need much more for the coming fight. The surface world is full of light that will seek to burn us. Kaelen nodded once in silent understanding. His new body hummed with stolen power. His senses reached out through the stone. He could feel the guards waiting above. They were nervous about the unexpected ascent. They had heard the riot down below. The elevator shuddered to a sudden halt. He had reached the topmost gatehouse. Voices shouted from the other side of the gate. "Identify yourself immediately. The mine is under lockdown." Kaelen took a deep breath and concentrated. The shadows in the elevator shaft coalesced around him. They became a second skin of pure darkness. I said, "Identify yourself, or we will fire." The gates began to crank open slowly. Crossbows were aimed directly into the elevator. The guards saw only a swirling black mist. Then 2 violet eyes opened within it. A voice like grinding stone spoke to them. "The Empire's enemy has come for payment." The shadows shot forward like sharpened spears. They pierced the guards through their armored chests. Their life force was drained in a second. Their bodies collapsed onto the clean floor. Kaelen stepped out of the elevator finally. He was standing in a large stone barracks. Sunlight streamed through high windows, painfully bright. He hissed and shielded his sensitive eyes. The shade recoiled from the pure light. This illumination is offensive to our very nature. We must seek the comfort of shadows. Kaelen moved along the walls. Demarius? He could hear more guards approaching quickly. Their boots echoed on the stone floor outside. He slipped into a nearby supply closet silently. He needed a moment to adjust and plan. The door to the barracks burst open. A full squad of guards entered cautiously. They saw their dead comrades on the floor. They saw the open elevator shaft gaping. "Sound the alarm. The mine has been breached." One guard ran to a large brass bell. He never reached his intended destination. A shadow detached itself from the ceiling. It enveloped him completely in a dark embrace. His scream was muffled into nothingness. The other guards turned and fired their crossbows. The bolts passed harmlessly through the shifting darkness. Kaelen emerged from the closet behind them. His hands glowed with a deadly purple energy. "Looking for me?" he asked them softly. Panic seized the guards at his appearance. They were trained to handle prisoner riots. They were not trained to fight a demon. Kaelen moved through them like a nightmare. His touch meant instant and absolute death. His shadows disarmed and disabled them with ease. Within seconds, the entire squad was eliminated. The alarm bell remained stubbornly silent. Kaelen found a window overlooking the complex. The mine entrance was part of a military outpost. He was still deep within Imperial territory. The main road to the capital was miles away. He could not fight an entire army, not in his current state anyway. He needed to disappear into the world. He needed information above all else. The Shade whispered a suggestion in his mind. "The commander here will have orders. He will have maps and reports and news. We must consume his knowledge and his life." Kaelen agreed with the brutal logic. He moved through the outpost like a plague. Guards died without ever seeing their killer. He found the commander's office easily enough. The man was writing a report at his desk. He looked up as his door opened. He saw a prisoner standing there calmly. "How did you get in here, guard?" His hand moved toward a sword on the wall. Kaelen shook his head with a sigh. "That will not be necessary today." "Commander." The shadows slammed the door shut behind him. The commander's eyes widened in dawning horror. He recognized the famous traitor general's face. "You? But you are supposed to be." Kaelen was across the room in a flash. His hand gripped the commander's head tightly. "I am what your empire created, Commander. Now, you will tell me everything I need." The commander's mind was an open book. Kaelen saw recent orders from the capital. He saw his own wanted posters being distributed. He saw that his sister was still alive. She was living in the capital's slums. She was working as a servant for another. The information filled him with cold fury. He saw maps of the Imperial roads. He saw patrol schedules and security details. He took it all into his mind. The commander's life was a final bonus. Kaelen let the empty body slump down. He took the man's traveling cloak and hood. He also took a purse of heavy coins. He walked out of the office a new man. The outpost was now completely silent. He was the only living thing left. He walked out the main gates casually. The sun was setting in the distance. The long road to the capital awaited him. He pulled the hood low over his face. The shadows clung to him like old friends. He had become the enemy of the Empire. Now it was time to make them regret it. The road to the capital was long and dusty. Kaelen kept to the shadows like a wraith. His stolen cloak hid his distinctive features. Well, the hood also shielded his eyes from the sun. The primordial shade disliked the direct sunlight intensely. It whispered constant complaints within the confines of his mind. This burning light is an affront to us. We must find a darker path to travel. Kaelen ignored the ancient entity's endless grumbling. His thoughts were focused on a single goal. He needed to see his sister Ilara again. The commander's memories had been clear and painful. She was a servant in their old home. Their family estate now belonged to another. The thought filled him with a cold rage. He walked for days without any real rest. His new body did not require much sleep. He sustained himself on small animals and birds. Their life force was a paltry sustenance. The shade demanded more substantial meals from him. These morsels are barely enough for survival. We require the energy of thinking beings. Find us a worthy meal soon, vessel. Kaelen continued to ignore the relentless demands. He avoided towns and patrols with preternatural awareness. His senses could detect life from miles away. He finally crested a hill overlooking the capital. The white spires gleamed under the afternoon sun. It was a beautiful city built on lies. His homecoming felt bitter and deeply unsatisfying. He needed to get inside the walls unnoticed. The main gates were heavily guarded and watched. His wanted poster was nailed to every surface. The artist had captured his likeness perfectly. He would need to use a different entrance. He remembered the old sewers from his youth. They emptied into a river outside the walls. The entrance was hidden by thick, thorny bushes. He moved under the cover of approaching nightfall. The shadows deepened and became his allies. He found the rusted grate exactly where he remembered. The metals shrieked in protests as he pulled. He slipped into the foul darkness without hesitation. The smell was horrific and overwhelming. Rats scurried away from his terrifying presence. Their tiny lives were not worth the effort. He moved through the familiar tunnels with purpose. He emerged into a slum alleyway. Hours later, the air was thick with smoke and despair. This was the underbelly of the glorious empire. People here were too poor to care. They did not look at a hooded man. He moved through the narrow streets like a ghost. His estate was in the noble district. Unfortunately, that area was well patrolled and brightly lit. He would have to wait for full night. He found an abandoned shack to wait inside. The shade was restless and eager for action. Finally, we are within the beating heart. Let us find a noble to consume. Their fear will be a fine vintage. Kaelen silenced the voice with an effort of will. He only cared about one thing tonight. Seeing Ilara was his sole objective now. Night fell, and the city grew quieter. The noble district's lamps were lit one by one. Kaelen moved from rooftop to rooftop silently. His agility was far beyond human limits now. He reached the wall surrounding his old home. The sight of it made his heart ache. The gardens were overgrown and poorly maintained. The new owners clearly had no pride. He slipped over the wall and landed softly. He saw a light in the kitchen window. A lone figure was washing dishes inside. Her back was to him, but he knew. He would know her shape anywhere, always. It was Ilara, his dear little sister. She looked thin and tired and worn. Her hands were red from the hot water. A fat cook shouted at her from across the room. "Hurry up with those plates, you lazy girl. The master expects his dessert very soon." Ilara nodded meekly and worked faster. Kaelen felt a murderous fury rise within him. The shade eagerly fed upon his raging emotions. This insult cannot be allowed to stand. We should enter and kill them all. Their lives are worthless compared to hers. Kaelen forced the anger down with difficulty. He could not reveal himself to her yet. It would put her in incredible danger. He needed to know she was safe first. He needed to plan his next move carefully. He watched her for hours in utter silence. He saw her finish her punishing long work. She carried a bucket of scraps outside. She walked toward a small shed near the stables. This was clearly where she slept now. The injustice of it was absolutely staggering. A general's sister, reduced to this pathetic existence. He waited until she entered the shed. He moved across the yard without a sound. He peered through a crack in the wooden wall. The interior was small and cold and bare. A thin blanket covered a lumpy straw mattress. Ilara sat on the edge of the bed. She held a small locket in her hands. It contained a tiny portrait of their mother. She was crying silent, hopeless tears alone. Kaelen's heart broke into 1,000 pieces. He almost called out to her right then. He stopped himself at the very last second. A shadow moved near the main house. A man was walking toward Ilara's shed. He was well dressed, and, clearly, the master. He had a lecherous smile on his face. He carried a bottle of wine in one hand. He knocked on the shed door, lightly. "Ilara, my dear, are you still awake? I thought you might like some company tonight." His voice was slick with false kindness. Ilara's face filled with immediate stark terror. She shoved the locket under her thin pillow. "Please, Master Branford, I am very tired. I must wake up early tomorrow morning." The man named Branford pushed the door open. "Nonsense, girl. I insist on your company. You have been so very lonely lately." He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. Kaelen saw everything through the crack now. Rage consumed him completely and utterly. The shade screamed its approval inside his mind. Branford reached out to touch Ilara's cheek. She flinched away from him in pure fear. "Do not be difficult, my dear sweet girl. I can make your life much easier." Kaelen had seen and heard enough. The shadows around the shed began to boil. The temperature dropped suddenly and dramatically. The lamp inside the shed flickered and died. Branford cursed loudly in the sudden darkness. "What is wrong with this damn lamp?" A voice spoke from the darkest corner. It was the sound of grinding bones. "You have touched what is mine, Branford." Branford spun around in complete confusion. "Who is there? Show yourself immediately, you coward." Two violet eyes opened in the blackness. They were the only things visible now. Ilara gasped and pulled her blanket up tightly. Branford took a step back in shock. "What kind of trick is this?" Kaelen stepped forward into the faint moonlight. His face was pale and marked with shadows. Branford's eyes widened in dawning horrified recognition. "But you are dead. The mines." Kaelen's smile was a terrifying thing to see. "Death was not quite ready for me, but it is very ready for you." Branford stumbled backward and fell on the bed. He fumbled for a dagger at his belt. A shadow ripped it from his hand. It clattered across the wooden floor loudly. "Please, do not kill me, I beg you. Take whatever you want. Just spare me." Kaelen looked past him to his sister. Her face was a mask of utter confusion. She did not recognize her own brother yet. The changes were too severe and too deep. Kaelen focused his attention on Branford. "You will leave this girl alone forever. You will give her a better position. You will treat her with respect and kindness. You will never speak of this night to anyone." Branford nodded his head frantically in agreement. "Yes, anything you say. I swear it." Kaelen leaned in very close to the man. His eyes glowed with malevolent purple energy. "If you break your oath, I will know, and I will return for your worthless soul." He let the shadows recede back slightly. The lamp flickered back to life weakly. Branford scrambled away from him in total terror. He ran from the shed without looking back. Kaelen was left alone with his sister. She stared at him with wide, fearful eyes. "Who are you? Why did you help me?" Kaelen's heart ached at her unanswered questions. He wanted to tell her everything right then, but he knew he could not do it. His presence was a death sentence for her. He simply bowed his head to her. "I am a friend who remembers your brother. He was a good and loyal man. Remember that when they speak his name." He turned and walked toward the door slowly. "Wait," Ilara called out to him softly. "Thank you. Thank you for helping me." Kaelen did not trust himself to speak. He simply nodded and stepped into the night. The shadows swallowed him whole once again. He had seen her, and she was safe. For now, that was enough to sustain him. His vengeance would continue its bloody path. But now he had something precious to protect. The game had just become much more complicated. The city's shadows felt different after seeing Alara. They were no longer just a place to hide. They were a constant reminder of his promise. Kaelen moved through the noble district like smoke. His encounter with Branford had been a risk. A necessary one, but a risk nonetheless. The man's terror was a tangible scent in the air. The primordial shade savored the lingering emotion greedily. That one's fear was a sweet delicacy. We should have consumed him entirely, nonetheless. His kind are like weeds within a garden. Kaelen pushed the voice into the background. He needed information more than he needed sustenance. The imperial palace loomed in the distance. Its white walls were a blatant symbol of lies. He needed to get inside those walls unseen. The commander's memories provided basic layout information, but the security details would have changed. His wanted status guaranteed heightened alertness and patrols. He found abandoned watchtower overlooking the palace. Its stone was cold and rough under his hands. He settled in to observe the patterns. Guards changed shifts with clockwork precision every 4 hours. Their routes were predictable and mindlessly repetitive. Magical wards glowed faintly around the main gates. They would detect any hostile intent immediately. The shadows offered him a perfect view. Hours passed without any notable activity. Then a single figure emerged from a side door. He moved with the arrogance of true power. His robes were finely cut and impossibly expensive. Kaelen recognized him from the throne room. This was Minister Theron, the Emperor's chief advisor. He was a key architect of the Empire's policies. He was also a man who enjoyed his vices. Theron slipped into a waiting, unmarked carriage. It moved away from the palace quickly. Curiosity sparked within Kaelen's mind. This was an opportunity he could not ignore. He followed the carriage over the rooftops. His movements were silent and completely effortless. The carriage stopped at a discreet townhouse. The location screamed of illicit meetings and secrets. Minister Theron entered without knocking at the door. Kaelen descended into the alley beside the building. His shadows sought out cracks in the mortar. They became his eyes and his ears inside. The minister was in a lavishly decorated study. Another man waited for him there impatiently. "You are late, Theron." The prince grows impatient. He demands to know the current situation. The speaker was a General Kaelen, recognized General Marcus, a staunch supporter of the crown prince. Theron poured himself a large glass of wine. "The situation is under control. Completely, Marcus. The traitor Kaelen is dead and buried. The mines have swallowed him whole forever." Marcus did not look convinced or reassured. "Then why the increased security at the palace? Why the panic in your eyes, Theron? The prince senses you are hiding something important." Theron drained his glass in one gulp. "There have been some minor complications recently. A few guards have gone missing from their posts. It is nothing to be concerned about, really." Marcus stepped closer, his face hard. "The prince does not like complications, Theron. He wants the project to proceed smoothly. The Archmage requires a steady stream of energy. Any interruption could be catastrophic for us all." Kaelen's interest was sharply piqued now. The project, the Archmage, the energy. These pieces were beginning to form a picture. Theron waved a dismissive hand in the air. "The flow from the mines remains uninterrupted. The prisoners continue to die for their empire. Their life force sustains the Emperor's shell perfectly. The Archmage's work proceeds exactly as planned." Marcus's voice dropped to a harsh whisper. "And what of the Crown Prince's ambitions? When will he assume his rightful place? This pretense of a ruling council is tiresome." Theron's smile was cold and cunning. "The prince will be crowned soon enough. Once the Archmage completes the final ritual, the Emperor's remaining life will be transferred. The prince will gain his father's power and longevity. Our empire will enter a new golden age." Kaelen felt a cold chill run through him. The Emperor was a coma-bound puppet, indeed. The Crown Prince was an impatient, eager heir. But the Archmage was the true player here. He was using them all for his own ends. This was far worse than simple betrayal. This was a conspiracy to usurp life itself. The shades stirred with excitement at the revelation. "This magic is an abomination against nature. It must be destroyed root and stem. The energy they steal is rightfully ours. We must consume this so-called archmage completely. Kaelen agreed with the entity for once. This could not be allowed to continue. He needed to learn more about the ritual. He needed to find the archmage's sanctum. The meeting inside was coming to an end. General Marcus left through a back door. Minister Theron remained behind for a nightcap. He was alone now and vulnerable. Kaelen decided to pay him a visit. The lock on the window was simple. He slipped inside the study without a sound. Theron was humming to himself by the fire. He did not hear the approach of death. Your plans are quite ambitious. Minister Theron spun around, spilling his expensive wine. His eyes bulged at the sight before him. The hooded figure with glowing violet eyes. Guards, intruder, help me this instant. Kaelen smiled beneath his hood darkly. They cannot hear you over the wards. You paid for silence and privacy, remember? Now, you will answer my questions completely. Theron fumbled for a letter opener desperately. A shadow snatched it from his hand. It melted into a puddle of molten metal. What are you? What do you want from me? Kaelen took a step closer to him. I want to know about the ritual. I want to know about the archmage. I want to know everything right now. Theron's courage broke like a dry twig. He fell to his knees, begging pathetically. Please, I was just following orders. The prince and the archmage forced my hand. Kaelen placed a hand on the man's head. Show me. The memories flooded into his mind violently. He saw the archmage a figure of pure power. He saw the emperor lying in a crystal coffin. Tubes of light siphoned his energy away slowly. He saw the mining operation's true horrific purpose. The prisoner's life force was being collected. It was stored in large glowing crystals deep underground. The archmage was using it to extend his life. He was centuries old and incredibly powerful. The crown prince was a mere pawn. A willing pawn, but a pawn nonetheless. The final ritual required a massive amount of energy. The archmage planned to sacrifice the prince. He would use the prince's royal blood. It would complete the transformation into godhood. The emperor would die, and the prince would die. The archmage would rule forever as a god. Theron knew all this, and supported it willingly. He was promised a high position in the new order. Kaelen saw the location of the sanctum. It was deep beneath the palace itself. The entrance was hidden behind the throne. He had everything he needed now. He released the minister's mind from his grip. Theron collapsed onto the floor, whimpering softly. Please, I have told you everything I know. Kaelen looked down at the pathetic man. You have indeed been very helpful, Minister, but you are a traitor to your empire. You are a traitor to humanity itself. The shadows in the room began to stir. They reached for the cowering minister hungrily. No, wait. I can help you further. I can be your spy inside the court. Kaelen shook his head slowly and sadly. I have no use for a snake. The shadows consumed Minister Theron completely. His screams were muffled by the dark velvet. When they receded, nothing remained of him. Not even a single ash or memory. Kaelen turned and left the townhouse silently. He now knew the true enemy's name. The archmage was the source of the corruption. The crown prince was a fool and a tool. The emperor was a victim like so many. His path was clear and undeniable now. He must descend into the palace depths. He must find the archmage's sanctum and stop him. The shadows agreed with this new purpose completely. They whispered of power and consumption and victory. Kaelen looked toward the palace with new determination. The game had just changed dramatically forever. He was no longer just seeking personal vengeance. He was now the only thing standing between the empire and a monstrous god. The palace walls were a fortress of light. Kaelen stood in an alley across the wide plaza. His shadows recoiled from the glowing magical wards. The primordial shade hissed its displeasure inside his mind. This light is a barrier against our essence. We must find a crack in their armor. There is always a weakness in order. Kaelen's eyes scanned the imposing structure endlessly. The main gates were an impossibility for entry. The walls were too high and too watched. The memory stolen from Theron provided another option. The ancient sewers ran beneath the palace itself. They were a relic of an older time. The entrance was in the slums, naturally. He moved through the filthy streets once more. The people here were too concerned with survival. They did not see the predator in their midst. He found the old grate behind a tavern. It was rusted shut from years of neglect. His enhanced strength tore it open with ease. The smell that emerged was beyond description. He descended into the absolute darkness without hesitation. The filth did not bother him anymore. He was already damned in so many ways. The tunnels here were narrower and more twisted. Rats with glowing eyes watched him pass by. They sensed a greater predator and kept their distance. He followed the map in Theron's memory. It led him to a solid stone wall. This was supposed to be the entrance point. He placed his hands on the cold, wet stone. The shadows extended from his fingertips, like roots. They sought the seams in the ancient masonry. They found a hidden mechanism behind the stone. A soft click echoed in the narrow tunnel. A section of the wall slid aside silently. It revealed a clean, well-lit passage beyond. The air here was dry and smelled of ozone. This was clearly the Archmage's private access route. Kaelen stepped through, and the wall closed behind him. The passage was lined with glowing blue crystals. Their light was painful to his shadowy senses. The shade recoiled from the purifying energy. This light burns us more than the sun. We must proceed with utmost caution here. Kaelen pushed forward, keeping to the darker patches. He could feel powerful magic humming in the walls. This was a place of great power and danger. He heard voices echoing from up ahead. Two figures in arcane robes were conversing quietly. They were acolytes of the Archmage, undoubtedly. The transfer is proceeding ahead of schedule. The prime subject is weakening faster than expected. The other acolyte nodded with a grim expression. The Archmage will be pleased with this progress. He wants to begin the final alignment tomorrow. They continued walking without noticing Kaelen. He waited until they turned a corner ahead. Then he moved forward like a silent ghost. The passage ended at a massive ornate door. It was made of a strange, dark metal. Symbols of power were etched into its surface. They glowed with a soft golden light. This was the entrance to the inner sanctum. Kaelen knew he could not open it. The magic here was too strong and pure. His shadowy nature would trigger every alarm. He needed another way to see inside. He noticed a ventilation shaft high above. The cover was loose and barely attached. He leaped upward and caught the edge silently. He pulled himself into the narrow, dusty shaft. It was a tight fit for his shoulders. He crawled forward through the stifling darkness. The shaft descended at a steep angle gradually. It opened into a larger chamber ahead. The view took his breath away completely. He was looking down into the main sanctum. The room was vast and circular in shape. The ceiling was a dome of sparkling crystals. In the center stood a massive crystal coffin. The Emperor lay inside it, pale and still. Tubes of brilliant light connected to his body. They pulsed with a slow, rhythmic energy. His life force was being drained away, methodically. Around the coffin stood 7 larger crystals. They glowed with the collected energy of thousands. The stolen lives of the mind prisoners pulsed within them. The sight filled Kaelen with a cold fury. The Archmage stood before the coffin with his back turned. He was tall and clad in deep purple robes. His hands moved in complex arcane patterns. He was chanting in a low, guttural language. The Crown Prince stood nearby, watching eagerly. "How much longer until the transfer is complete? I grow impatient with all this waiting." The Archmage did not turn to look at him. Patience is the key to true power. Rushing this process would be catastrophic for us. The energy must be perfectly aligned and balanced. The prince paced back and forth nervously. "I want to feel the power now. I have waited my entire life for this." The Archmage's voice was a dry whisper. "You will have your power soon enough. But remember our agreement. When that happens, you will rule, but I will guide your hand." The prince nodded his agreement impatiently. Yes, of course, I remember our agreement. You will be the power behind the throne." The Archmage smiled a thin, cruel smile. Kaelen saw the truth. The prince did not. The prince was not meant to rule anything. He was just another source of energy. Another sacrifice for the Archmage's ambition. Kaelen needed to get closer to them. He needed to hear the rest of their plans. He shifted his weight slightly in the shaft. A small piece of metal broke loose beneath him. It clattered onto the sanctum floor below. The sound was tiny in the vast room, but the Archmage's head snapped up immediately. His eyes glowed with a piercing blue light. "We are not alone here, Your Highness." Kaelen froze in place, not daring to breathe. The Archmage's gaze swept across the ceiling. It passed over the ventilation shaft without stopping. "It seems a rat has found its way in. The wards must be reinforced again later." He returned his attention to the crystal coffin. The prince looked around nervously for a moment. "Should I call the guards to search?" The Archmage waved a dismissive hand. "That will not be necessary right now. It was likely just a falling bit of debris. This place is very old and crumbling." Kaelen let out a silent breath of relief. He had come dangerously close to discovery. He continued to watch and listen carefully. The Archmage placed a hand on the coffin. "The subject's life is nearly at its end. We will require a new source soon. A source of royal blood is necessary. The ritual demands a sacrifice of great power." The prince nodded his understanding eagerly. "I have already chosen a suitable candidate. My cousin is young and strong and healthy. His bloodline is pure and full of potential." The Archmage's smile was hidden by his hood. "Excellent. Bring him to me tomorrow night. We will begin the final phase then." The prince bowed and turned to leave. "I will see it done immediately, master." He walked out through a side door. The Archmage was now alone in the sanctum. He waited until the door was fully closed. Then he began to laugh a soft sound. "Foolish boy, you are the sacrifice. Your blood is the key to my ascension. Your cousin will simply take your place afterwards. A puppet ruler is so much easier to control." Kaelen had heard everything he needed. The Archmage's plan was even more monstrous than imagined. He needed to retreat and plan his next move. He began to back out of the ventilation shaft slowly. A shadow moved in the corner of his eye. One of the Archmage's acolytes was standing there. He was looking directly up at the shaft. His eyes met Kaelen's through the grating. The acolyte's mouth opened to sound an alarm. Kaelen acted on pure instinct and desperation. A tendril of shadow shot down from the shaft. It wrapped around the acolyte's throat tightly. It silenced him before he could make a sound. But the sudden use of power was a mistake. The Archmage felt the disturbance immediately. His head snapped up toward the ventilation shaft. His blue eyes glowed with furious intensity. "I knew I felt a presence here. Show yourself to me now, intruder." Kaelen knew he had to run immediately. He scrambled backward through the shaft as fast as he could. Behind him, he heard the Archmage's angry roar. "Seal all the exits, this instant! No one leaves this sanctum alive today." Kaelen scrambled backward through the narrow ventilation shaft. The metal groaned in protest under his frantic movements. Behind him, the Archmage's voice rose in fury. Magical energy crackled through the air like lightning. The shade screamed warnings inside Kaelen's mind. "His power seeks to bind us completely. We must flee this cursed place now." Kaelen reached the junction where he had entered. He dropped down into the passageway below. The blue crystals lining the walls flared brightly. Their light burned his skin like actual fire. He hissed in pain and pulled his hood lower. He could hear booted feet approaching rapidly. Guards were coming from both directions now. He was trapped in the Archmage's private hallway. The shade thrashed within him, demanding release. "Let me out. Let me consume them all. Their fear will be a weapon for us." Kaelen knew that was a terrible idea. Unleashing the shade here would reveal everything. He would lose his only advantage, which was secrecy. He pressed himself into a deep, shadowy alcove. The guards ran past him without stopping. They were focused on the sanctum entrance ahead. They had not seen him in the darkness. He waited until their footsteps faded away. Then he moved in the opposite direction quickly. He needed to find another way out immediately. The memories from Theron were frustratingly incomplete. This area was beyond the minister's security clearance. Kaelen relied on his enhanced senses instead. He felt a slight draft coming from the left. Moving air meant a potential exit somewhere. He followed the draft down a side passage. This area was darker and less maintained. The blue crystals were spaced farther apart here. The shadows felt stronger and more welcoming. The passage ended at a heavy iron door. It was locked and sealed with powerful magic. The shade recoiled from the enchantments on it. This door is warded against our kind. We cannot pass through it safely. Kaelen placed his hand on the cold metal. He could feel the magic resisting his touch. It was designed to detect and trap intruders. He heard more shouts echoing from behind him. The search was intensifying throughout the complex. He was running out of time and options. He noticed a grate near the floor. It was an old air circulation shaft. The magic on it felt old and faded. He pried the grate open with his bare hands. The space beyond was tight and dusty. It was a tight fit for his shoulders. He squeezed into the narrow opening desperately. He pulled the grate closed behind him just in time. Guards rounded the corner with weapons drawn. They scanned the area with glowing magical lanterns. The intruder was spotted in this section. Search every alcove and every shadow completely. Kaelen held his breath and remained perfectly still. The guards' lights passed over his hiding place. They did not detect him through the metal grate. "There is nothing here, Captain." He must have doubled back toward the sanctum. The guards moved away, continuing their search. Kaelen allowed himself to breathe once again. He began crawling through the dusty air shaft. It was a tight and claustrophobic space. His shadows provided the only light he had. The shaft seemed to go on forever. It branched off in several different directions. He followed the strongest draft of air. It led him upward at a steep angle. His muscles burned with the effort of climbing. Finally, he saw a light ahead of him. It was a grate overlooking a familiar hallway. He recognized the opulent decorations immediately. He was near the throne room itself. This was a stroke of incredible luck. He peered through the grate into the hallway. Two nobles were speaking in hushed, urgent tones. The Archmage has locked down the lower levels. They say an assassin tried to kill him. The other noble shook his head in disbelief. Who would be foolish enough to try? The Archmage is the true power here. The first noble leaned in closer conspiratorially. Some say it was the traitor general, the one who escaped from the abyssal mines. The second noble laughed, a dismissive sound. That is just a peasant ghost story. No one could survive those mines. Truly, they moved away, continuing their conversation elsewhere. Kaelen waited until the hallway was empty. He pushed against the grate from the inside. It was stuck fast from years of paint. He pushed harder with his enhanced strength. The grate popped open with a loud screech. He froze and listened for any reaction. The hallway remained silent and completely empty. He dropped down onto the polished marble floor. He was in the heart of the palace now. This was the most dangerous place for him. His wanted poster was everywhere in this building. He could not stay here for very long. He needed to get outside the walls again. He moved toward a nearby window cautiously. It overlooked a courtyard filled with guards. That was not a viable exit route. He needed another way out of here. He remembered the secret passage he used before, the one behind the throne room tapestry. It was a risk, but his only option. He slipped into the throne room silently. The room was empty at this late hour. The massive diamond throne sat on its dais. It seemed to glow with an inner light. The tapestry depicting the first emperor hung behind it. Kaelen moved toward it with careful steps. He heard voices approaching from the main entrance. He ducked behind a thick marble column quickly. The crown prince entered with his personal guards. He looked angry and more than a little nervous. "I want the intruder found and executed. I do not care about the methods. Use whatever means are necessary to find him." His guards bowed and spread out through the room. They began searching behind statues and furniture. One guard walked toward Kaelen's hiding place. Kaelen prepared to unleash his power if needed. The shade eagerly awaited the chance to feed. The guard was almost upon his position. Then a captain called out from across the room. "Your Highness, we found something over here." The guard near Kaelen turned and walked away. Kaelen let out a silent sigh of relief. The prince walked over to see the discovery. "What is it? Have you found the intruder?" The captain held up a small piece of fabric. It was torn from Kaelen's cloak. During his escape, This was found near the ventilation shaft. It confirms the intruder was indeed there. The prince's face paled noticeably at this news. He knows about the sanctum, then. This is a disaster of the highest order. The captain nodded his head in agreement. We must inform the Archmage immediately, sire. The prince shook his head in sudden panic. No, we will not tell the Archmage anything. He would blame me for this security failure. We will handle this ourselves, without his knowledge. The captain looked uncomfortable with this order. But sire, the Archmage will find out eventually. The prince's voice became sharp and commanding. Then we must find the intruder first. Double the guards on every palace entrance. Check every person leaving the grounds thoroughly. The guards bowed and hurried to obey his orders. The prince stood alone for a moment, thinking. Then he, too, left the throne room quickly. Kaelen was alone once again. Finally, he moved from behind the column toward the tapestry. He found the hidden catch behind the fabric. A section of the wall slid open silently. He slipped into the dark passage beyond. The wall closed behind him, leaving no trace. He was safe for the moment, at least. The passage led downward in a spiral. It would take him back to the sewers. He had escaped the palace against all odds, but he had also learned a valuable truth. There was a rift between the two allies. That was a weakness he could exploit later. He reached the sewer tunnel and breathed deeply. The foul air was a welcome relief now. He had survived his first encounter with the Archmage. He had learned the full extent of the plan. He knew the prince was a potential sacrifice. He knew the Emperor was almost completely drained. He knew the ritual was happening tomorrow night. He had to act quickly to stop it. He moved through the tunnels with renewed purpose. He needed to find allies for this fight. He could not do this completely alone. The Shade whispered its usual complaints about that. We need no one but ourselves, Vessel. Others will only betray you again, eventually. Kaelen ignored the voice for once. He was learning to think for himself again. The enemy of his enemy was his friend, even if that friend was a foolish prince. He reached the surface outside the city walls. The night air was cold and clear. He looked back at the glowing palace. It was a beautiful cage for a monster. Tomorrow night he would return there again. But next time he would not be hiding. Next time he would be the hunter. The shadows around him seemed to agree. They stretched and coiled in anticipation of the hunt. The game was entering its final phase now. The sewers offered no comfort or safety now. Kaelen moved through the filthy water with purpose. His mind raced with the information he had learned. The Archmage's ritual was happening tonight. The Crown Prince was a willing fool and a pawn. The Emperor was a dying shell in a coffin. Kaelen needed to stop the ritual completely, but he could not do it alone. The Shade protested this idea with violent intensity. We require no assistance from these insects. Their lives are meaningless next to our power. Kaelen pushed the entity's voice aside firmly. He needed a plan, and he needed allies. The Crown Prince was afraid of the Archmage. That fear was a weapon he could use. He reached the slums and found a hiding place. It was a crumbling, abandoned watchtower overlooking the palace. He needed to get a message to the prince, but he could not risk exposure himself. He remembered Elara was still in the city. He could not involve her in this danger. The risk to her was far too great. He needed another way to make contact. An idea formed in his mind slowly. It was risky, and probably completely insane, but it was the only option he had. He waited until the sun began to rise. The city slowly came to life around him. Vendors opened their stalls in the markets. Guards changed shifts at the main gates. Kaelen focused his power on a single guard. He was a young man, with a kind face. He was not like the others he had consumed. This one had dreams of a better life. Kaelen reached out with a tendril of shadow. It was a delicate and precise operation. He did not seek to kill or consume. He only sought to influence and suggest. The guard's mind was easy to manipulate gently. He suddenly felt a strong urge to deliver a message. He walked toward the palace with determined steps. He bypassed the usual checkpoints without stopping. His fellow guards assumed he was on an errand. He reached the prince's personal chambers directly. The prince's guards stopped him at the door. "Halt," State your business here, soldier. The influenced guard spoke in a monotone voice. I have a message for the prince. It is about the incident last night. The prince's guards exchanged nervous glances. They knew about the intruder in the sanctum. They allowed the young guard to enter. The prince was eating his breakfast alone. He looked up annoyed at the interruption. What is it? This better be important. The guard delivered Kaelen's message word for word. The enemy of your enemy waits tonight. He knows the Archmage's true plan for you. Meet him at the old watchtower at dusk. Come alone if you value your life. The prince's face went pale with shock. He dropped his fork onto the plate loudly. Who gave you this message? Speak now. The guard's eyes cleared of Kaelen's influence. He looked confused and disoriented for a moment. I do not know, Your Highness. I felt a sudden urge to come here. The prince dismissed him with a furious wave. Get out of my sight this instant. The guard bowed and left quickly. The prince sat alone for a long time. His hands trembled slightly on the table. He knew the message was from the intruder. He knew the intruder was the traitor general, the man who should be dead in the mines. He also knew the Archmage's true nature. He had suspected the truth for some time. The Archmage's promises felt too good to be true. But his ambition had overridden his caution. Now he faced a terrible dilemma. Trust the word of a known traitor, or trust the Archmage, who wanted to sacrifice him. It was not a difficult choice, really. He would go to the meeting tonight, but he would not go alone or unarmed. He called his most trusted captain to him. I have a dangerous mission tonight. I need you to prepare a contingent of men, the most loyal and discreet ones we have. They will hide near the old watchtower. They will await my signal to attack. The captain bowed and accepted his orders. It will be done as you command. The prince spent the rest of the day planning. He was not a fool despite his ambition. He would hear what the traitor had to say. Then he would have him killed immediately. Dusk fell over the city like a blanket. The prince rode out. With a small group, he left them at the base of the hill. He climbed to the watchtower alone as instructed. The old stone structure was dark and silent. He entered with his hand on his sword. Show yourself, traitor. I am here as you asked. Kaelen stepped from the shadows behind him. I am here, prince. Do not draw your sword. That would be a very fatal mistake. The prince spun around to face him. He saw the changed man before him, the glowing eyes and the shadowy tattoos, the air of power and danger around him. What are you? Some kind of demon? Kaelen smiled, a cold and empty smile. I am what your empire created, prince. A weapon aimed at its corrupt heart now. The prince kept his hand on his sword. You said you know the Archmage's plan. Tell me what you think you know. Kaelen told him everything he had learned. He spoke of the Emperor's true condition. He described the energy siphoned from the mines. He revealed the Archmage's plan for the ritual. You are not the heir to the throne. You are the sacrifice for his ascension. Your royal blood is the final key. He will kill you and take your power. Then he will rule as a god forever. The prince listened with a growing horror. He knew in his heart that it was true. The Archmage had been too eager to help. He had asked too many questions about bloodlines. Why should I believe a word you say? You are a traitor to the Empire. Kaelen's eyes glowed brighter in the dim light. You already believe me deep down inside. You have felt his true intentions for a while. I am giving you a chance to live. Help me stop him before he kills you. The prince shook his head in denial. Even if I believed you, so what? The Archmage is too powerful to defeat. His magic is beyond any mortal means. Kaelen took a step closer to the prince. I have power of my own now. Power that can match his magic, maybe. But I need access to the sanctum. I need you to get me inside there. The prince laughed a harsh, bitter sound. You want me to betray the Archmage? To help you, the Empire's greatest enemy? Kaelen's voice became soft and deadly. The Archmage is the Empire's greatest enemy. He has manipulated you and your father. He has killed thousands of innocent people. He plans to kill you and take your throne. I am the only one who can stop him. The enemy of your enemy is your friend. The prince hesitated for a long moment. He weighed his options carefully, and slowly he could signal his men to attack. But that would not stop the Archmage. He could agree to this dangerous alliance, but that meant trusting a known monster. He made his decision, finally. What do you need from me, exactly? Kaelen outlined his plan quickly and efficiently. You will go to the sanctum tonight. You will tell the Archmage. You found me. You will say I am hiding in the slums. That will lure him out of the palace. While he is gone, I will enter the sanctum. I will destroy the crystals and free the Emperor. The prince nodded his understanding slowly. And what about after we stop him? What happens to me and to the Empire? Kaelen's smile was not reassuring at all. You will become the Emperor you wanted. I have no interest in ruling this empire. I only want to destroy the man who broke me, and the system that allowed him to thrive. The prince extended his hand reluctantly. We have an agreement then, General. Kaelen looked at the hand but did not take it. Do not betray me tonight, Your Highness. If you do, I will kill you first. Then I will let the Archmage have his way. The prince withdrew his hand with a shudder. I will keep my word to you. Meet me at the sewer entrance at midnight. He turned and left the watchtower quickly. Kaelen watched him go from the shadows. The Shade was furious about this alliance. He will betray us. The first chance he gets. We should have consumed him when we could. Kaelen knew the Shade was probably right, but he needed the prince's help tonight. It was a risk he had to take. The fate of the Empire hung in the balance, and his revenge was finally within reach. The night would decide everything for them all. Midnight found Kaelen waiting in the filthy sewer. The air was cold and heavy with moisture. The prince arrived exactly on time. As promised, he was alone and looked nervous but determined. His fine clothes were covered by a plain cloak. The Archmage took the bait, as you predicted. He has taken his best acolytes and left. He is hunting for you in the slums now. The sanctum is lightly guarded for the moment. Kaelen nodded once in acknowledgement. Good. Now, take me to the sanctum entrance. Remember what'll happen if this is a trap. The prince led the way through the tunnels. They reached the hidden door in the wall. The prince placed his hand on a specific stone. A section of the wall slid open silently. The familiar blue-lit passage stretched out before them. The guards are loyal to me personally. They will not sound the alarm for us. They moved quickly through the empty hallway. The prince's presence ensured safe passage through the wards. The guards they passed bowed and stepped aside. They reached the massive metal sanctum door. 2 elite guards stood watch there. As always, they looked surprised to see the prince. Your Highness, we did not expect you tonight. The Archmage said he would be gone for hours. The prince waved a dismissive hand at them. I need to check on my father's condition. Open the door for me immediately. The guards exchanged an uncertain glance with each other. The Archmage gave strict orders, sire. No one is to enter in his absence. The prince's face hardened with royal anger. I am the crown prince of this empire. I will not be denied entry to my own father's side. Open this door now or face treason charges. The guards hesitated for only a moment longer. Then they bowed and began the unlocking process. The complex magical seals disengaged one by one. The massive door swung inward without a sound. The prince entered first, with Kaelen close behind. The guards did not seem to notice the shadowy figure. The sanctum was exactly as Kaelen remembered it. The Emperor lay in his crystal coffin silently. The 7 large crystals pulsed with stolen energy. The sight filled Kaelen with a cold fury. The prince stared at his father with wide eyes. He had never been allowed this close before. He looked so pale and so very still. Is he even still alive in there? Kaelen moved toward the nearest energy crystal. He is alive, but barely hanging on. These crystals are draining him completely dry. They must be destroyed here and now. The prince drew his sword with a sudden movement. Stop, right there, traitor. I cannot allow that. Kaelen turned to face him slowly. He was not surprised by this betrayal at all. I knew you would choose this path, Prince. Your ambition outweighs your sense of self-preservation. The prince smiled a cold and triumphant smile. You are a fool to have trusted me. I have already signaled my guards outside. They will be here in just a moment. The Archmage will reward me greatly for your capture." The sanctum door burst open behind them. Dozens of guards poured into the room quickly. They surrounded Kaelen with their weapons drawn. The prince laughed at his own cleverness. "You see, I win this game completely. Now, surrender and make this easier on yourself." Kaelen looked around at the circling guards. The shade screamed for release within his mind. "Let me out! Let me feast on them all." Kaelen smiled beneath his hood darkly. "You are right about one thing, Prince. This game is indeed over now." He raised his hands toward the ceiling high above. The shadows in the room began to stir violently. They detached from the walls and floor like living things. The guards stared in confusion and growing fear. What kind of magic is this exactly? The prince took a step backward nervously. "Kill him now! Do not wait for my order!" The guards charged forward with their weapons raised. Kaelen unleashed the primordial shade completely. Darkness exploded outward from his body in a wave. It consumed the first wave of guards. Instantly, their screams were cut off into nothingness. Their life force flowed into Kaelen like a flood. The other guards stopped their advance in terror. The prince's face was pale with utter shock. "What are you? Some kind of monster?" Kaelen's eyes glowed with violent purple light. "I am the enemy your empire created, Prince. And now I am here to collect my debt." He moved through the guards like a whirlwind of death. His touch meant instant and absolute oblivion. The guards fought back with desperate courage. Their swords passed through his shadowy form harmlessly. Their arrows dissolved into dust before touching him. He was unstoppable and terrifying in his power. The prince turned and ran toward the door. He was not fast enough to escape. A tendril of shadow wrapped around his ankle. It dragged him back into the center of the room. "Please, spare me. I will help you now. I will give you anything you want." Kaelen looked down at the begging prince. "You have already given me everything I want. You gave me access to this room. You gave me an audience with the Archmage." The prince's eyes widened in sudden understanding. "The Archmage? He is not in the slums. You knew I would betray you from the start." Kaelen's smile was a terrible thing to see. "I needed him to leave the sanctum. I needed him away from his power source. And you played your part perfectly, Your Highness." The main sanctum door slammed shut suddenly. A figure stepped from the shadows near the coffin. It was the Archmage in all his glory. His eyes burned with furious blue fire. "You used my pawn against me cleverly, but you have made a fatal mistake tonight. You have entered my place of ultimate power." The prince looked between them in pure terror. "Master, you are here. Help me, please." The Archmage ignored the begging prince completely. He focused his attention entirely on Kaelen. "I felt your presence the moment you entered. I allowed this little drama to play out. I wanted to see your power for myself. It is a fascinating and primitive energy. I will enjoy taking it from you slowly." Kaelen faced the Archmage without any fear. "This ends tonight for both of us. Your ritual will not happen as planned." The Archmage laughed, a cold and hollow sound. "You are too late, foolish mortal. The ritual does not require the prince's blood. It only requires a source of royal energy." He pointed a finger at the crystal coffin. The emperor's body glowed with a sudden light. His mouth opened in a silent, endless scream. His remaining life force was ripped from him. It flowed into the Archmage's waiting body. The emperor's form crumbled into dust completely. The Archmage grew in size and power visibly. "Now you will face a true god." Kaelen knew he had underestimated his enemy. The Archmage had planned for every contingency. The prince was just a distraction all along. The real sacrifice had always been the emperor. The Archmage raised his hands and began to chant. The 7 crystals flared with blinding, intense light. Beams of energy shot toward Kaelen simultaneously. The shade screamed in pain and defiance. Kaelen met the attack with his own darkness. The two powers collided in the center of the room. The resulting explosion shattered the crystal coffin. The prince was thrown against the far wall hard. He slid to the floor, unconscious or dead. Kaelen and the Archmage faced each other. The battle for the Empire had truly begun, and Kaelen was finally facing his true enemy, The man who had destroyed his life completely. The man he would now destroy in return. The shadows and the light warred for dominance. The outcome would decide the fate of everyone.